Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I am finally doing my wrap up for February. This was a huge reading month. I haven't read this much or listened to this many audiobooks in the longest time, if ever. I did a count and I read and listened to 42 books back in February, and 31 of those were audiobooks. This was my last month of Kindle Unlimited too. I was trying to make the most of my subscription, but I ended up getting another 2 months free of KU. Amazon is doing this promo. I have a link to it if you want. It's only for non-KU subscribers though, so if your subscription ended like mine, definitely use it. So I'll link it down below. Most, if not all, of these audiobooks I actually talked about in one of my previous videos, talking about listening to 35 KU audiobooks. So if you haven't watched that one, also check it out. Let's just get started on my wrap up. I actually have my guest host here with me, just sleeping on my lap. He's been so sleepy these days, probably exhausted because everyone is home and he's constantly being given attention. The first book that I read in February is A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Mila Vane. This is a fantasy romance and I loved it. I love barbarians, I love fantasy romances, so this had everything that I was hoping for and it all worked out. It is the first book in a Gathering of Dragons series, but unfortunately there are no actual dragons in the book. The hero, Matic, his parents are murdered by the heroine's father, who is king of her kingdom. Matic ends up kidnapping Yven and they have the most delicious slow burn ever. It is very slow, but there is a ton of chemistry involved, and when things finally heat up, they are on fire. I loved it. I thought the slow burn was really well done, and even when the romance itself was slow, the book was never boring because there's just so much going on in this world. And then Hate Notes by Vi Keeland and Penelope Ward. I listened to this one in audio and sadly it didn't work for me. I wasn't all that into the romance. I thought it was boring. The characters, especially the hero, was really unoriginal, which is sad because the actual premise, I thought it sounded amazing. The heroine, after returning her or like exchanging her wedding dress that she unfortunately did not get to use, she finds a note written from a man named Reed, a really loving note to that wedding dress's owner, and mysteriously ends up being his new assistant. To put it simply, Reed is a jackass. Clearly something happened with his ex-fiancée to make him so annoying, so he had the biggest chip on his shoulder. I did not like his character. And then the heroine was only slightly better, but then she kind of acted a lot immature. She has this really weird quirk where she air types, like literally air types when she gets angry instead of, you know, actually expressing her anger in word form. So I never really grew to like these characters. Their enemies to lovers relationship was pretty boring, nothing special. These two authors, whenever they write together or even individually, it's either hit or miss. Mostly misses for me, and this one was another miss. And then I binged on all 3 books of the Dumonts series by Karina Halley. I gave all of them 3 stars. The last one maybe like 3.5, but still they were all very average to me. The story just focused a lot too much on the whole family intrigue for me and not enough on the romance, but the audiobooks did have some fantastic French accents. So the first book, Discretion, is about Olivier, who is heir to the Dumont family, or one of the heirs. So he's filthy rich and then he ends up falling for average old American tourist Sadie. The romance is sweet, very hot. Karina Halley writes some great steam in the series, but then there is this whole other aspect of the book which is about Olivier's father getting murdered, possibly by Olivier's uncle, who is just pure evil. His uncle has 2 sons, so Olivier has 2 cousins who also get their stories, and the older cousin seems like he's working with the terrible uncle. So that whole plot line is stretched out through all 3 books, so the ending of Discretion is not quite as satisfying as it could have been. Book 2, Disarm, is a little bit more interesting with the forbidden romance between Olivier's cousin Blaise and Olivier's adopted sister Seraphine. So they are cousins, but they're not blood related. So that's the whole forbidden romance between them. They've always had feelings for each other. Seraphine and Blaise work together to try to take down Blaise's father. Again, lots of intrigue. I did like Seraphine and Blaise, but I never really loved them. But by the end of this book, I was really excited for the 3rd and final book, which is Disavow, and Pascal's book, the supposedly evil cousin slash brother. But he's not. I mean, he's not a good guy, but he's not like that evil. So he's the anti-hero of this series, and I was really looking forward to his book to see how he would be redeemed. I did enjoy this one. It is my favorite of the series. Pascal's heroine is Gabrielle, who was a former servant of his family. She was actually raped by his father, and that was the reason why she quit working for them. But now she's back for revenge against Pascal's father. There's a lot of suspense in this one. I really enjoy the romance with Pascal falling head over heels in love with Gabrielle, and like you can see him actually being so loving and worshipful of her. Next, I listened to 2 Helena Hunting books, even though I own the paperbacks. A Lie for a Lie and A Favor for a Favor. These are the first 2 books in the All In series, which is her new hockey romance series. A Lie for a Lie, book 1 was fantastic. I love this one so much. The audiobook literally had me like smiling and giggling out loud. It was so sweet. The main characters first meet when they go on their retreats to Alaska, but then the hero is abruptly called away. Rook, also known as RJ, he is the famous professional hockey player. Bellany doesn't recognize who he is, so he keeps his identity a secret from her during their fling. But of course, when they reunite, everything comes back out of the open, and there's a little twist, a fairly predictable twist during their reunion. I was actually surprised by how much we got of the fling. It's like a good 40% of the book, their time in Alaska, but that's where of course you can clearly see them falling in love. It says it's a rom-com, but I wouldn't quite go that far. It's nothing like her Pucked series, although we do get to see a couple Pucked characters in this book. It's just really adorable and sweet, and I love the main characters. The second book though, A Favor for a Favor, I did not love as much. I only gave this one 3 stars. It was okay. Like, there were some good parts, but there were a lot of parts that annoyed me as well. This book is about Rook's sister Stevie and Rook's hockey teammate Bishop. Stevie has just moved into her brother's apartment, who lives next door to Bishop. On site, they kind of hate each other. It certainly doesn't help that Bishop is a total jackass to Stevie for all the wrong reasons. He makes these assumptions and doesn't try to bother to apologize once he finds out the truth about her. That's him in a nutshell, basically making these rude, annoying comments to Stevie and about Stevie and never truly apologizing for them. They grow close as Bishop is injured and Stevie is his kind of physical therapist. But the main thing that really annoyed me with this book was how Rook from book 1, Stevie's brother, them being together was just not okay to him for God knows what reason, because he thinks he's in charge of his sister's sex life. He took the whole overprotective brother thing way too far. So all those things together, I just did not like. Next, I binged on a couple of Ella Good novellas. The first book was Killer Love. This one I thought it was great. The main couple is husband and wife. Lucas, the hero, is your typical Ella Good hero, alpha and obsessed with his woman. There's just something a little bit different about him, and that's that he is kind of like Dexter. He kills bad people. His wife does not know. He's a coroner. His daytime job is a coroner, so he kind of knows the best way to kill people and get away with it. This was surprisingly sweet despite the whole Dexter vibes. And then I read Secret Baby, which I did not like so much. I thought it was really boring. It's the pregnancy secret baby trope. Not not done very well. The characters had no personality to them. So yeah, this one just not that good. Next up, Million Dollar Marriage by Katie Evans. I thought this one was okay. It is the standalone sequel to Million Dollar Devil, which I sadly did not like all that much. I like the whole reality TV show thing going on. It's a mix of The Bachelor and Survivor. The hero and heroine go on the show in order to win this prize money. Luke is the absolute sweetest. He is kind of the only one who works towards helping them win on this game show. Between the two of them, he's the one with the skills. Nell, it took me a little while to get to warm up to her just because she comes across as very judgmental, especially towards Luke. The romance was only okay. I didn't really feel all that much between them. And then of course I read some more smutty novellas, this time Jessica Kane, the Lights, Camera, Insta Love series about this whole baking show thing. I read the first two books, the first two novellas, and I really enjoyed them. The first book was my favorite. I loved it. In A Pinch of Sugar, we have Alice and Sebastian. For each couple in the series, one person is a part of the panel of judges for the surprise pop-up baking show, and the other person is of course the surprise contestant. It's got your classic insta love from Jessica Kane, alpha obsessed hero. The daddy kink is very well done in this one. I thought it was so hot. Love this novella. In the second book, A Dash of Spice, Aiden, our second judge, is a professional hockey player who needs some help with his PR, which is why he's doing this baking show, and he falls for the Vegas showgirl contestant Lola. This time there's no daddy kink, but both of them are virgins. It's smutty as usual from Jessica Kane. I really enjoyed this one, but not quite as much as the first. What made it a little interesting while I was reading these novellas was that I was actually catching up on the Great British Bake Off on Netflix. It did make watching the show just a little bit different. Next up, I listened to Resist by Kate Bromberg. This one was, I give 2 stars to things that I don't like. I only save 1 stars for books that I absolutely hate. This one was not quite 1 star level, but I didn't like it, so I gave it 2. In this one, we have a madam heroine who runs basically a group of escorts. Riker is Vaughn's latest client, but when Riker's escort kind of drops out or gets sick, Vaughn instead steps in herself. Riker honestly is the biggest asshole. I love jerks. I love reading about them sometimes, but only when you can see like a different side of them, especially when they're around the heroine. And Riker, he was just plain old mean nearly the whole time he was with Vaughn, and both of them honestly were just non-stop arguing, and it wasn't even good banter, so I couldn't enjoy that part. I even tried to listen to the sequel, the second book, and the duet, because this first book kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but I couldn't even make it past 10 minutes in the sequel because I just didn't like these characters. And then I binged on all 4 books in the Fluke My Life series by Aurora Rose Reynolds. All of them were very average contemporary romances. They were very similar to each other, but still like fairly enjoyable to listen to and pass the time with. This author's writing style and like character style is very similar to if Kristen Ashley and Alexa Riley had a writing baby together. We have the KA alpha overprotective hero, but written in the insta-lovey way of Alexa Riley. So the first book, we have a homicide detective hero, and he falls in love with his new neighbor. It was okay, good, but not great. Nothing to particularly love. I mean, this is how I felt for like all 4 books in the series. In the second book, Stumbling into Love, we have a hookup turning into something more, mainly because the hero is wanting more. The heroine is the one running scared. I actually like this kind of dynamic. I prefer it to like the other way around. Book 3, we have an enemies to lovers romance between a firefighter hero and the daughter of a family friend. There is an Italian restaurant involved. The hero is that annoying, possessive kind of I don't want her, but I don't want anyone else to have her kind of hero. So this one was probably my least favorite of the series. Drawn into Love, the last book, The fourth book in the series is probably my favorite, mainly because of how adorable it was. We have a single parent, a single dad hero who is so sweet on the heroine, and I love the kid in this one too. And then of course I had to read Angry God. I got an arc of it, dropped everything to read it, and sadly I did not like it. I gave it 2 stars, like I also gave her last book, In the Unlikely Event. I did enjoy the first 2 books in the series. I gave both of them 4 stars, but I was especially excited for Vaughn because he was the most intriguing out of all of these characters, out of all of the second generation. And we also got a little hint of Vaughn and Lenny. They had a fantastic chemistry together. You could tell they were going to be definitely enemies to lovers. So I was so excited, but everything about this book just fell flat. It's your typical really boring bully romance. Vaughn would be cruel to Lenny. Lenny, thankfully, is not 100% a pushover, but like anytime Vaughn would get near Lenny or start touching her, she would just fall under his spell of hotness. And I hated how desperate she was every time that Vaughn was just a little bit nice to her. Like, no, that doesn't really cross off everything that he did before that. Vaughn himself, despite being a mystery in the first 2 books, is very, very predictable in this last book. In his own book, you can obviously tell what his whole quest for revenge is and why he needs this quest for revenge. It is traumatic what happened to him, but this whole plotline is very similar to what happened in The Unlikely Event. He just had so much potential, but the author kind of squandered it. Also, he's not a virgin if he gets BJs all the time. Like, oral sex is still sex. I did, however, really like Vicious in this book. I'm sure I'm in the minority for this, but I actually like Vicious a lot more when he's not in his own book. He was a fantastic husband and father in this one. You get a good amount of Vaughn's parents in this book, which made me happy because they were the only ones that I actually liked. Also, Vaughn could have done a little bit more groveling towards the end. So now after this book, I am very, very scared to see how I will enjoy L.J. Chen's next book. And then I read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa, and I adored this one so much. I thought it was a fantastic enemies to lovers romance with some great diversity. The heroine in this one is Brazilian, and we get a lot of her Brazilian culture. Lena's hero is actually her ex-fiance's brother, and also the guy who broke up Lena and her now ex-fiance, but now they are forced to be in close proximity and actually work together for this new wedding job opportunity. I thought it was fabulous, so entertaining, so fun, lots of great chemistry between Max and Lena. I also loved Lena's family, her Brazilian family. They were such a riot, especially whenever they're all together. I already can't wait for Mia Sosa's next book, which is about Dean, who is Max's best friend. They have a fantastic bromance together. I love their friendship. Engaging the Enemy by Reese Ryan. This one is a fake relationship romance. I was actually looking for more fake relationship romances to read for a tropes rec video, but sadly this one, it was only okay. Didn't love it. This is also my first time reading Reese Ryan. I mean, her writing's great, but sadly I just didn't fall in love with the characters or the romance. The heroine is invited to an ex-boyfriend's wedding. Parker, her childhood nemesis, they were actually former friends until a falling out, and now they're enemies. Parker, his family's distillery company, wants to buy Kaylee's property, so the two of them make a deal. Parker will play the part of fake fiance for Kaylee, and Kaylee will sell her property to Parker. The chemistry was good, the writing is good, it's short, sweet, to the point. Another series binge is the Stay series. 3 books in the Stay series by Jennifer Probst. I really love this author. I haven't read her though in the longest time. Book 1, The Start of Something Good, was my favorite, and sadly, like, each book after I liked considerably less, but this first book was fantastic. We've got another enemies to lovers between opposites. Ethan, the hero, returns to his hometown from his time in the military, and he comes back with some PTSD. He is very broody, and the heroine is not. She's a go-getter, a city girl from Manhattan. There's just so much good banter and tension between these two. I loved it. And then book 2, a brand new ending, is a second chance romance and about Ethan's sister who runs the B&B. This one is a second chance romance. I was hoping I would love it more, maybe as much as the first, but sadly it was only okay. Like, a lot of things to like about it, but also a lot of things to be annoyed about. Ophelia and Kyle were childhood sweethearts, but when they moved to Hollywood, he chose his career over her, so she returned home to their small town, and now, like, over a decade later, Kyle is back. My main problem with Kyle was that I just never felt like he would have ever gone back to see Ophelia if he wasn't forced to. He had an amazing life during his decade in Hollywood, and he just did not seem like he ever needed Ophelia. Sometimes I honestly felt like Ophelia deserved better than Kyle, so I definitely needed him to work a little bit harder for me to enjoy this book more. And then the last book, All Roads Lead to You. This one was my least favorite, mainly because the narration was just not that good. It kind of ruined the story for me, which is sad, but narrators honestly make or break an audiobook. Harper is the last Bishop sibling to get her romance. Ethan, Ophelia, and Harper are all siblings, and this book is a very horsey romance. Harper is all about animals, and she has a new horse rescue. She's trying to rehabilitate it, and then the hero comes in as the horse trainer. Sadly, this one is a bit too much about horses for my liking. Next, I listened to Anyone But a Rich by Penelope Bloom, but this one I barely have anything to say about it because it was so boring and kind of confusing. The series has 3 books about these 3 friends who vow to never date the King brothers, but of course they all do end up falling for them. I just never really understood why they would vow to never date them, and then the story and the romance was all just very surface level. It needed more explanations, it needed to be more fleshed out. So yeah, this was my first book from this author, and I definitely would not try to read the rest of the series. Next, That Secret Crush by Megan Quinn. This is book 3 in the Getting Lucky series. I sadly only gave this 3 stars. It's a brother's best friend kind of romance with lots of secret crushes and unrequited love, except it's actually requited. So the hero, Eric, after failing his business venture, comes back home to try to rebuild his life. And of course, home is where his secret crush on his best friend, former best friend's younger sister, lives. All the feelings that they used to have for each other come bubbling up and explode. I honestly never really liked Eric all that much. For some reason, anytime he was with Eve, he felt like so immature, but I did like the whole restaurant aspect of them working together, her as the manager and him as the chef. And then I listened to another Aurora Rose Reynolds series. Her name is so hard to say. I messed it up like 3 times before I got this right. Her How to Catch an Alpha series, only the first 2 books are currently out, and like before, they were okay, 3 stars average. This first book, Catching Him, actually is a lot similar to the first book in that other series, as the main characters are also neighbors, new neighbors. It runs the similar Aurora Rose Reynolds plotline of an alpha hero who is very much into the heroine and goes all in. The second book, Baiting Him, has a baker heroine. She runs a bakery, which I love reading about. Also, the hero of this book is named Gaston, which is very amusing. They were both cute, sometimes entertaining, a little bit steamy, but again, I can't say that I really loved either of these books. And then I got to Tumble, which is probably my least favorite of the month. I gave it 1 star because I absolutely hated the hero. I actually stopped fully listening to it and kind of started skimming after like 65%. It's a second chance romance, but the kind that is so annoying to me. The heroine ran away to New York City after the hero broke her heart. So it's been over a decade since they've seen each other, and now she's back in their hometown. The hero, Dane, is a single dad, and you are not gonna believe who the mother of his kid is. I mean, you can kind of believe it because it's fairly predictable, but still, like, the dumbest thing ever once it's finally out in the open. So this hero, I just hated him. He was the worst. He did barely any like groveling to make up for all the hurt that he caused the heroine. I think he used his daughter as an excuse to not be able to do anything, but that was so lame. So this trash hero just ruined the whole book for me. Next up is Cheater by Rachel Van Dyken, which I didn't like all that much either, but I didn't hate it. Lucas, our cheater hero, was labeled a cheater when he woke up in his ex-fiance's sister's room like the morning of their wedding. He didn't actually do anything, but no one believed that, so he embraced this title of cheater. I'm not really sure why he ever did that, and now he lives his life by dating a different girl for every day of the week. Like, he has his Monday girl, his Tuesday girl, and so on. And once a girl wants out of there, he immediately finds another girl to replace that day of the week. So already I was like, okay, this is probably a bad idea to continue with this audiobook, but I didn't, even though I was so annoyed throughout the whole thing. His heroine is his ex-fiance's other sister, the youngest sister, I believe, and the one that he's apparently always had a crush on. I don't know what's wrong with him, but yeah, now he has hired her as his new intern. But Lucas just bothered me to no end. There's this one scene at the office where he literally has sex with one of his flavors of the week in the office in front of the heroine, and I was like, why? Next up, thank God, an amazing book. I listened to The Birthday List by Devney Perry, and oh my gosh, I love this book so much. I thought it was beautiful, so well written. The narration was fantastic. The romance just stole my heart. Poppy is a widow. Her husband tragically passed away a couple years ago during a robbery gone wrong, and now she's trying to live her life through her late husband's birthday list. He has a list of all the things that he's wanted to do by like certain birthdays, and now she's trying to fulfill them. Her hero, Cole, was actually the officer that arrived at her house to let her know about her husband's passing. So I thought that was a very interesting setup. And now he is back in her life and trying to show her that she can love again. Cole is the absolute sweetest. Oh my gosh, I love this man so much. He is so tender, so patient and loving with Poppy. Poppy also runs a restaurant called the Mason Jar, which is a play on her last name, and I thought that part was so interesting to read about. I love this one so much, so I had to immediately read the next book. I actually read the sequel. I listened to the first book, but I couldn't wait for the audiobook to come in from the library, so I just got the ebook. Letters to Molly was so good as well. I finished this one in a day. Like, I was so hooked onto the story. Letters to Molly is a second chance romance, and we get to see Molly and her husband, her separated husband Finn, in the first book, and the way that their relationship kind of imploded on itself towards the end of The Birthday List. So now this is their second chance romance, trying to possibly fix things and make them right again, because even though they are now currently divorced, it's been a few years, I think, since the end of The Birthday List. Finn and Molly still love each other. So after the death of Cole from book 1, Finn and Molly started to kind of break apart. Finn would become distant. He was never home. He just basically checked out on Molly and their 2 kids. And then Molly herself was on the urge of a breakdown. And the cause of their actual split was Molly cheating on Finn. And despite her cheating, I never really blamed her. Maybe it's because I'm always more sympathetic to the heroine. If the hero did it, I would have been way madder. But yeah, I absolutely felt for Molly. She absolutely atoned for what she did though. Finn put her through the ringer. Then Molly starts getting these letters in the mail week after week, and they're all written by Finn, but they're not actually sent from Finn. But these letters hold Finn's point of view from their 15 years of marriage, of how much he loved Molly, and it kind of gives you a glimpse of what went wrong. So even though Molly was the one who cheated, Finn was also to blame in the demise of their marriage, but you can tell how much they absolutely still love each other. I was praying for them to find each other again. The angst was amazing. I just could not put this book down. These two books in the series, in the Mason Jar series, are brilliant. If you haven't read them, if you haven't listened to them, please do. They're so good. Next up, I listened to two books in the First Wives series by Catherine Bybee. Fool Me Once, which is book 1, was okay. Didn't really love it, didn't connect all that well with the characters. Lori is a divorce attorney and she helps these temporary marriages dissolve. She falls for Reed, who is a private investigator and trying to investigate these temporary marriages. Book 3, unfortunately, I did not like as much, or I liked it even less. This heroine is the one who goes into those temporary marriages. She was randomly brutally attacked and now she's trying to deal with the after effects of that. The main reason why I didn't like this one all that much was because there was barely any romance. It was very much focused on Avery and her struggle with dealing with trying to learn to protect herself, dealing with the PTSD of her attack. Barely any romance developed, and it was just really boring. The Friend Zone by Soraya Wilson is a sports college romance and it had a lot of potential. I was really liking the first half of this audiobook, but then the second half just kind of ruined it for me. Actually, not even the last half. The last 20% ruined the book for me. So I gave this one 2 stars. We have a college quarterback, Logan, who falls in love with his coach's off-limits daughter. They become friends. Late night tutoring is involved, and Logan actually helps Jess with trying to get a date with her crush. What ruined the book for me though was Jess and how much of a pushover she became towards the end of the book, especially when it came to that crush, who you could clearly tell was using Jess and didn't even like her. I just couldn't understand why Jess didn't see any of that. She was just blind to how awful the dude was treating her. So next I read Wild at Heart by K.A. Tucker. This is the sequel to The Simple Wild, one of my favorite books of all time, and I thought this was a fantastic follow-up to that book. I didn't quite love it as much. I gave this one 4 stars, but it's still a great sequel. If you love The Simple Wild, highly recommend you try this one. It's a direct follow-up. Jonah and Kala are trying to figure out how to live together in Alaska. It's quite low drama, just everyday life for Kala and Jonah, but I loved it. I loved being back with Jonah, Kala, being in Alaska. K. Tucker just writes Alaska in a way that makes me actually want to live there, which is very impressive because I do not do nature all that well. Next, I listened to Royal Heir by Ruth Cardello. This is a royal romance. A bad boy prince hero falls for an American elementary school sweetheart of a teacher. It was sweet and cute. I give it 3 stars. There's a little bit more than just the fairy tale romance. There's a bit of danger involved, so it made things a little bit more interesting. Next, I listened to From Sand and Ash by Amy Harmon, and I love this book. I don't normally read or listen to all that much historical fiction, but this was fantastic, probably because there's a lot of romance in it too. It's a World War II historical fiction novel. Our main characters, Ava and Angelo, they grew up together, but they're not actually related. They become childhood sweethearts, but then Angelo decides to become a priest instead of being with Ava. And then World War II hits and Ava and her family, being Jews, are persecuted. Ava is on the run trying to hide her identity. Angelo tries to protect her, and now being together again, they find that they're still in love with each other, and Angelo does break his vows. But this book was fantastic. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time I was listening to this one. The writing was beautiful, the storytelling was beautiful. I could just vividly imagine this war-torn Italy that Ava and Angelo live in. It's tragic, it gets a little bit depressing, but it was just so So good. Highly recommend this one. Next, I listened to another Adriana Locke book, but this time I liked it a lot better than I did the first book in the Dogwood Lane series. Trouble is book 3 and a bit of a friends to lovers romance, just because the hero does not want to be in a relationship. It's slow burn with them being friends at first. It was sweet, sometimes funny, but also a little bit boring at times. I gave this one 3 stars, but I did like reading about Penn's development as a former player. And then I read Sworn to the Shadow God by Ruby Dixon. This is book 2 in the Aspect and Anchor series, which is a fantasy romance series. It's high fantasy with a heroine who is from modern day. She gets transported into this completely different world that has such things as gods and aspects and anchors and magic. I really love this world. I'm just amazed at Ruby Dixon's imagination. I loved book 1, Bound to the Battle God, and this was a fantastic sequel. You kind of have to love slow burn though to read this series, because they are very long books and it takes a very long time for the romance to heat up, but once they do heat up, it's so good. So the second book is about Ragos, the god of death, who we first met from the end of book 1, and Max is his new anchor, the one who basically keeps him alive. I thought this was a fantastic sequel. If you love fantasy romance, you absolutely need to read this series. There's action, there's adventure, lots of steam. I did have a little issue with the heroine being overly naive. The author tried to contrast that with the hero, but I think she did it a little bit too much. And then I listened to What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon. This is another historical fiction novel from her, and I loved it. Clearly, I am a fan of her writing. Beautifully written. The ending had one of the most amazing endings that I've ever read. It almost made me cry. This one is like Outlander, but Irish. It takes place during the Ireland Rebellion, and the heroine time travels back to 1921 Ireland, and kind of takes place of the Anne that lived in that time. She falls in love with Thomas, who is a doctor during the war, and she also becomes the mother of the past Anne's young son. I love this one. You're really swept away to Ireland. The romance is so sweet, so heartwarming in the midst of all this war chaos. There's a ton of action, danger. It's never a dull moment. Next, I listened to Parental Guidance by Avery Flynn. This is my first book from this author, and it was a cute rom-com. It's a hockey romance, fake relationship with a hero who needs to fix his bad PR. The main characters go on 5 fake dates. This one was cute and fun, but it was a bit too short for me. But still, it's very entertaining. If you want something lighthearted and short and sweet, this one is it. And my last book for February is Breathe by Kristen Ashley. Breathe is book 4 in the Colorado Mountain series. This one was okay. I give it 3 stars. I know I probably would have loved it a lot more if I read it years ago, back when I first started reading KA, but these main characters sadly didn't really work for me. I'm just not a fan of a pining heroine, and combine a pining heroine who has probably been celibate with a player hero who probably doesn't even notice her, then I like it even less. So Faye is that pining heroine who is like an almost 30-year-old virgin. I don't really have a problem with that. It's more that it feels like she's been waiting for the hero who absolutely does not deserve to be waited on. KA celibate heroines annoy me like crazy because they're always paired with non-celibate heroes. Chase is okay, except that anytime he wants anything, it's his way or the highway. He literally does not give Faye a choice, and he thinks that he's always right. This is also a big problem I have with a lot of KA heroes. They are way too overbearing sometimes. So this was very average. It did have potential with the small town librarian falling for the town cop, but sadly I just did not love those characters. So finally, that is my wrap up for February 2020. I hope you all are staying safe, staying healthy, and staying inside. Let me know if you read any of these. I'll link everything in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!